Hello, everyone. This is Josh and Dan from Monastery Dropouts. So we're hoping to bring some new information to you guys, and as always, we'd like to focus on helping people bring more inner peace in their life and keep things real to how things are in the modern times. Today, we want to focus on us how Dan and I became monks eventually, but we decided today that we would just talk about the beginning of my spiritual path and how I worked my way through Christianity and how I slowly transitioned into experiencing wider spiritual experiences. And before we started recording, Dan and I were talking about us meeting, and I was still in a lot of Christian dogma at the time. And Dan was, he never was in that because he was an atheist, and then he moved into experiencing more spiritual things. And so I guess why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about us meeting and like us engaging in a spiritual life.
Yeah, well, thanks, Josh. Well, let's see. I was working at the supermarket in Michigan, and I didn't really have anybody my age to connect with about meditation, and especially like self-realization fellowship and Yogananda. I just didn't know anybody into it. Just some people who were much older than me, and some people who lived hundreds of miles away. So I was just stunned when you started working at the supermarket and we were talking about, spiritual things, and I mentioned autobiography of a yogi, and you said, "Oh yeah, that's Paramahansa Yogananda, right?" I remember my jaw dropped, and I
Yeah,
was
and I
like,
think I think
"Hallelujah!"
I think for me, I was totally immersed in Christianity for a long time and I completely believed it, but I was always searching for more and more of the truth. And I guess before we go further into the video, I guess a couple of things that I think are really, really important key things I kind of want to say in the beginning is how you distinguish between like true spirituality and if it's dogma. Or like as a Christian, I was always fearful that like these amazing experiences I was having was like of the devil or something, because that's what the religion taught. Like if it wasn't taught by the church, it was bad. And I think it's important to recognize that spiritual experiences, you will feel bliss, you'll feel joy, you'll feel expansion. And a lot of like the physical world, when you get really, really deep into meditation, your body kind of dissolves and the physical world dissolves, and you feel very, very expansive, and you feel like this lightness of being. And you kind of, you the desires of life of the physical world, they fade away. The aversions to other things, they fade away. So those are some basic truths that happen. And also we were talking about this in previous videos, but judgment fades as well. And
Yeah,
so, and that's one way, like with the religious aspect and the dogmas of religion, there's so much judgment. And you know that that's not true spirituality, because when you're in the expansive state of love, then you don't, that just fades away. Like even if you disagree with someone's life or what they're doing, you still just like you, it's almost overwhelming how much you care and love for them, and you just want the best for them. And in Christianity, a lot of times they'll say like, we hate the sin, but we love the sinner. And it's like, that's just kind of horseshit, basically. It's like, well, you're still judging them, and like you're tying everything that they do. You're saying, well, that's not really them. I love them, but not anything that they do or the lifestyle that they live or anything they believe. It's like, well, you're just lying to yourself. Then you don't actually know what loving them is. But if you truly just like you interact with someone and you feel complete bliss, and you want the best for them truly, no matter how they are, if they change or not, then you know you're in that space.
right.
So that was the reason I wanted to bring it up early in our video, is because early in my Christian life, there was so much fear and shame and doubt about what was real and what wasn't, because you're trying to read this text that, the biblical text that has all of these, um, like it'll say one thing in one passage and a different thing in another passage, and then people will like tell you what it says, and then there's a culture, like a modern social culture about like what Christianity actually is, and that has changed like every decade for the last couple hundred years. And so it's really confusing when you're in it. So knowing that those experiences are real and that they're not evil is kind of it's an important it's an important thing. And when I met Dan, I was kind of going through this transitional period where I was really having a difficult time with the dogmas and the religious aspects of Christianity. But I had gotten so much out of the spirituality of Christianity, and so Dan had a different view. He was looking at it from more of like an Eastern point of view, like with Hinduism. Um, and the teacher Paramahansa Yogananda taught that Krishna and Jesus taught the same things. And so I was really questioning, like, is Dan like a representative of evil, like of the devil, or like what he was saying seemed real, but it was confusing for me. And I was like really like praying about it and trying to figure out like, um, and if Dan, from your perspective, you're probably just like, I just want to experience God. And I'm like, is this guy evil?
That's funny. Yeah, I didn't have any questions about whether you were evil or not.
Yeah. It's definitely a way that religion can kind of mess a person up. Like you're such a pure-hearted spiritual seeker, and you were looking at the thing, you're searching very similarly as me, but the religion was making me, because you had different views, it was making me think that maybe there maybe I could go to hell because I believe the same things as you believe. And so it doesn't sound like I like communicated that to you when we met though.
I think it was probably more of an internal struggle for you. I know that you had mentioned, like I remember what you would say is you'd be like, "Well, I'm a Christian, but I kind of like learning about other things," and you definitely emphasized, "I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian," and I remember them thinking like, "Well, that's fine, I don't care, I get, you
Yeah.
can be a Christian then, it's." I just was so happy that somebody would talk about these spiritual things and was interested in them. I
Yeah.
didn't. I kind of felt like I think based on the way you were talking about things, you'd say I'm a Christian, but like learning about these other things. But I could kind of tell him like I think Josh is actually going to shift over to just a spirituality, just because it, it did seem like it was just based on a label, just that you were like, okay, but I can't really become a yogi because I'm a Christian. I thought, well, that's odd. I don't see why. I think to myself, well, I
Yeah.
don't see why not. But yeah,
Yeah, and I guess the interesting thing about that is my Christian friends, they would say like I viewed myself as like a very like a conservative Christian, like the people I went to church with. But my friends in high school and stuff like that, they grew up conservative Christians, and like I was like nothing like that to them, because I would be like researching meditation and Buddhism, and I was like learning about anything I possibly could because I wanted to know the truth, and like that was my big struggle at the time. Is like I want to know God. I don't want to suffer. I want to know the truth. And so I think they would be like, they'd kind of like laugh at me and say like, you come to church and you're a Christian, but they call me like the Buddhists, even though I was like in my head I was 100% like Christian, and they would be like they'd kind of jokingly call me like the Buddhist because I would meditate, but I'd meditate on Christian symbols like
Mm.
Jesus and the different saints and different prophets and stuff like that. So that's why when we met, it's like I was already experiencing the world that you lived in with like meditation and like trying to know God. And so yeah, so I guess I'll talk about the beginning of how I became a Christian and then move on from there. And we had kind of said like my parents like they didn't really go to church and stuff like that. And then I struggled a lot with like the like legal stuff, and I got in trouble a lot, and so I just needed some more like stable foundation, and that's how I found Christianity originally. Um, and so that's how I got involved in that culture. And it was kind of a funny thing because like, my parents didn't really go to church, but I would go like 2 or 3 times a week, and like I would be like reading the Bible every day. And I mean, I got to a point where I was like such a true believer that like I would like preach to every single person. I saw like a duty, like that Christian duty of like trying to convert every single person you meet. I'm sure it was like annoying for a lot of people around me because like when I was younger, I'd been doing like drugs and doing like not horrible things, but I was like I was doing I was like stealing things and like doing drugs, and then those same friends are like, okay, now this guy's like a Christian, he doesn't do any drugs, and like he's preaching to me. So yeah, I'm sure that was kind of a weird thing. Um, but over time, basically, I kind of like left those old friends, and I kind of adopted my like church family, and that was really important to me. Um, and I think what kept me in Christianity, and I think we've talked about this before, is the big mistake I had made was that, I'd go to church and I would pray and we would sing, and you would start to feel that energy come in, and you'd feel blissful, and you'd feel like that presence of God. And so the mistake I had made was that because I experienced those things, I thought that Christianity had to be 100% true because I experienced it through those symbols and through that vehicle. And so I
Yes.
didn't realize at the time, and like later on, it would take me a long time to figure it out. But you can have experiences of God through different types of symbols. And like now, like I can use symbols from almost any religion, and it can help me bring me into the presence of the divine. Whereas at the time, I thought like Christianity had to be true because I experienced God through that religion, and so all and like they were teaching that all the other religions were false. So I
Mhm.
assumed that it was 100% true, and so it's kind of a sad thing, but I think most religions do it where like they help you experience those like first feelings of the divine, and then they say like then they add all these other things that are just human ideas onto it, and then people believe it because they experience a little bit of that piece of the divine.
Right.
And then I think later on you just start to learn like, oh, I don't need any of these symbols. And for me, like I almost don't even like to use the word God anymore because the experience of the divine is almost like it's just an expansion of my consciousness, and it merges with a wider consciousness. And so the term God to me is a little bit tricky because there's so much historical perspective to it. Um, but but the experience of the divine, it's just for me, it's just a widening of consciousness accompanied by like the feeling of being like needing nothing, feeling complete peace, like feeling bliss and joy. Like it feels like everything that you've searched for your entire life, you're just home, like you're there. And to
Right.
me, that's what it is. Um, and so, what is your perspective on that?
Well, it's interesting that you are talking about how you did have spiritual experiences when you're in the Christian evangelical church, because I know other people that they've had spiritual experiences in their Christian church, and it's kind of a similar thing, and that they're like, okay, this is 100% right because I had some experience of God or my higher self, and yeah, and for instance, I remember one woman, she said she went on a mission trip, and they there was some miracle that it was supposed to rain, but they needed it not to rain for their event, and lo and behold, it didn't rain. And it seems like, I think to us now it seems like a very minor miracle, but to her that
Yeah.
was like evidence that they were 100% correct. And you know what? I mean, their prayers may have worked, and it may have actually, some angels in heaven may have said, "Oh, well, let's help them out." I don't, I don't doubt that. I mean, it also could have been a shifting weather pattern, but I don't, I don't doubt that God would help them. They were working on a good mission. But that doesn't mean just because you have one spiritual experience or one um, even miracle happens to you that everything you think and do is correct.
Right.
And it's not somebody, well, it's somebody I've met, and were strong missionaries when they were younger. And apparently, when they were in Africa, they prayed over a blind woman and she regained her sight. And this person also has some very mistaken views, I think, about Christians and Christianity and other religions and the end of the world, etc. But when they were in Africa, they were on a spiritual mission. they were helping
Yeah.
people. They had good intent. So, I think it's totally possible that that was just a miracle through God that happened through them because I think they were open and trying to do good.
Yeah.
But yeah, does that mean everything that they think and do is correct and perfect? No, absolutely not.
Yeah. And I think so from my perspective, a lot of times when we have these videos, I'll talk about like things that they say in the Bible and things like that. And I think a lot of the I think Jesus was he experienced the divine, like he was merged with the divine. And so a lot of those passages, there's a very mystical aspect that are true and they happen. And I'll give you an example. After I kind of left the church and I'd been at the yoga center meditating, and I think both of us basically had stayed at the yoga center for a year, even though it was different times. And I was meditating like, several hours a day, most days of the week. Um, I went back home and I went to our Catholic church. And I remember I just sat there and like I did Kriya Yoga, which is like a breathing technique that they teach at the yoga center. Paramahansa taught it. And so I just meditated as everything was happening around me in the church. And um, I remember just going into this like very expanded, blissful state. And it felt like there was like fire like coming from above, like through my body and like going down below. And I felt very expanded. I just felt like almost like this, it was almost uncomfortable about how much energy was flowing through me. And I was just looking around. I remember like there's like these people like yawning and they're almost like falling asleep and like they did not want to be there. And I remember just like looking at them and just being like, oh my God, like everyone is a saint. And I just remember like even though they were like falling asleep at church, like I felt like their presence, like that deep divine presence. And and like all of a sudden like the chorus behind me would like they'd start singing and then it would just be like this new sense of bliss. And then like the I guess they're not pastors. He was like giving his sermon and it was like so like blissful to me. And um there's a verse and I think it's in like first or second Peter or something where it talks about when the second coming of Christ comes, or like when New Jerusalem comes, like the world will turn to fire. And there's a lot more to it, but basically I was like, oh, this is what he's talking about. Like the second coming is like you feel this like powerful energy that feels like fire, and like you feel this expansive state, and like the whole world shifts before you. And I'm like, that's what the second coming is. Like
Right.
it's not like a physical thing that's happening. And so I think a lot of the teachings that like they get misconstrued because the people who are teaching them, like the preachers or the head people in the church, they're not experiencing those deep mystical experiences. And so they're
Mhm.
teaching at this like lower level, which is totally fine. But it's like when you're having those deep experiences and you relate it to someone who's never experienced them before, they'll start to say things like, "Ooh, that might be something bad. Like that might be evil."
Yeah.
And it's clearly not. Like it's probably a peak human experience experience. And like yeah, so that's a confusing thing when you're going through it and you don't have someone to explain it to you. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to make this video, is because there's people who experience very powerful experiences of the divine, and but they question it. And I just don't want people doing that.
Right. No, that's good. I'm sure that'll help a lot of people. Yeah, for me, it was just such a different path. I'd never been indoctrinated into the belief that I could
Yeah.
go to hell or, God would hate me or anything like that. It was, I went to a church where some people did dogmatically believe, but nobody could convince me. And my parents never attempted to convince me. They just, it was almost more like a social thing. We'd go along, we'd learn about the Bible and this stuff. But there was never any forced belief. And
Yeah.
so, left to my own decisions, I'd said, well, this doesn't really sound right. This Jesus person is very interesting, but all the rest of this stuff doesn't really make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And so I formed my own conclusion, and so luckily I didn't have that particular barrier.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
you probably didn't know that you're putting me through hell by telling me the things that you believe. because I remember being like, I'd go to meditations at Self-Realization Fellowship with you, and then I would come back because at Self-Realization Fellowship they talk about the teachings of Christ, and then they do a similar teaching of like the teaching of Krishna, and then I remember being like, if this is evil, I reject it, but if it's not, like it's okay or whatever, um, and so yeah, it's kind of funny because it's like that was a very, very, very challenging time for me. And I remember, I think I've told you this before, but I remember there's a verse or there's a passage in Huckleberry Finn where Huckleberry Finn is like he has to decide if he's going to help the slave Jim or not, and society has told him that helping a slave is bad, but in his heart he knows what's true, and he wants to help like a human, the human in front of him, and he says like screw it, basically screw it, if I go to hell I go to hell, but I need to do like what's right for me. And I remember like thinking of that line from Huckleberry Finn, and like that was basically my like decision with like letting go of the dogmas of the church, and it was like challenging because my whole life, my whole foundation of what I believed, I had to let that go so I could accept a higher truth. But I'm like I'm willing to go to hell so that I can find truth. And like I had like those specific thoughts. Like if God punishes me for seeking the truth, then I'll go to hell. Like that's fine. But I need to find what the truth is.
Yeah, and the logical fallacy of the thinking, that the other things could be the devil, other religions could be the devil, just because they're not Christianity, is that, just because I have this spiritual experience through Christianity, then nobody else must be having a spiritual experience except through Christianity.
Right.
And, it's a small thing, but once you can get beyond that, it actually
Mhm.
opens up a lot of things for a person on a spiritual path. And it doesn't have to be, it's like you said, it's a letting go of judgment. So even just that could be the whole thing. You don't need to learn about Hinduism if you're a Christian and you're getting benefit that way, if you're finding God through Christianity. But you have to let go of the judgment of the other people in the world.
Yeah.
That's all.
No, I think that's great. And I think we've gone for quite a while, and I think it's a good place to end this video. But I think as the videos go on, we'll kind of talk about how we move. We keep trying to, but how we moved into being monks.
We'll get there
Uh,
eventually.
yeah, and we'll talk more in other videos about like different spiritual experiences we've had, and how to get there. And I'd like to do little videos with like little inspirational things that are short videos too. So thank you everyone for joining us on Monastery Dropouts. Dan and I really appreciate people who are watching, and feel free to leave comments. Feel free to ask questions if you want in the comments below. But have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for watching, everyone. See ya.